There is a very obvious and predictable emotional loop that you are stuck in that is causing you to sabotage your relationships. Now, this is going to apply to you whether you are anxious, whether you are avoidant, whether you are disorganized, any insecure attachment styles, okay? So I call it the abandonment loop. When you learn to heal this, this is how you stop sabotaging your relationships. So the whole point of this video today is to build your awareness around what the 6 stages are so you can identify your own self-sabotaging behavior. I want to show you how to interrupt it and then ultimately how to heal it, so how to get out of this. Okay, so that's what we're going to cover today. So step 1, you're going to have to excuse my Johnny age 5 handwriting. So stage 1 is false stability. So false stability is basically the wound that's underneath the surface. So your abandonment wound is underneath the surface. It's false stability because we build a life on top of this wound. We become functional on top of the dysfunction. But all that's happening is underneath the surface, we are waiting, okay, for something to happen to activate that wound. So we might go through our life day to day. We might feel okay for the most part. Let's say you're single, right? You feel pretty good. But you might find that every time you get into a relationship, that's when things really start to go downhill. So this will be your false stability. Okay, we'll go with that as the example. Stage 2 is the trigger. Okay, so this is the event that happens that triggers the wound underneath. So I'll use a couple of common examples. The trigger, let's say you're an anxiously attached man. A trigger for you could be she doesn't text back as quickly as she normally does, or you might feel like she's pulling away. That is going to trigger you. Okay, that's going to trigger that fear of abandonment, that fear of rejection underneath you. Or the trigger could be, if you are an avoidant man, the trigger could be feeling suffocated. Okay, the person that you're with is starting to expect a lot from you, and that triggers your avoidant attachment. That triggers the abandonment wound. Then we go into survival mode. Okay, so this is your fight, flight, or freeze response. This is when you are activated. Okay, this is when your body starts to react. Okay, you get that sinking feeling in your stomach, your chest feels tightened, your heart starts to race, you might start to sweat, your breathing might start to change. Your body is prepping for battle. Okay, even though it could have been a small trigger, which it usually is, your body is ready for battle. It's good to go. So you're in that survival mode. So when you are in that survival mode, that takes us to stage 4, which is, call it a compensating behavior. So the compensating behavior is the behavior that you engage in. Fucking hell, I felt like it took ages to write. The compensating behavior is the behavior that you engage in to create some sense of safety within yourself, to feel better within yourself. This usually it can look pretty ugly. Okay, it's not always pretty. So for example, the compensating behavior might be if you're anxiously attached, you feel she's pulling away, your compensating behavior is you're checking your phone every 2 minutes to see if she's replied. You are checking her social media to see if she's online. You are thinking of double texting her, you call her, okay? You're spiraling into anxiety because your body has just gone through these phases. You're in survival mode, okay? So you're panicking at this point. Compensating behavior for an avoidant attachment could be you start to shut down, you start to pull away, you start to create distance between you and the person that you've got feelings for because you don't feel safe in that environment. There's loads of compensating behaviors, okay? It's essentially, it's an attempt for us to create safety within the body, for us to feel safe. And these are coping mechanisms that we often learned years ago. And it's to avoid some sort of uncomfortable feeling. Okay, because when you're triggered and you feel anxious or you start to feel threatened or you start to feel panicked and uncomfortable in some way, no one wants to feel that, right? So you resort to these compensating behaviors that you learn at a very young age, okay? Because years ago, this is what kept you safe. This is how you learn to survive. Compensating behaviors as well might be addictions. It might be scrolling, social media, junk food, adult videos, adult websites, all of these things that we use to avoid how we're truly feeling. So then, stage 5 would be the emotional crash. So the emotional crash is that realization. Okay, it's that aha moment. It is recognizing, I've done it again. I've spiraled again, or I've shut down again. Okay, it's that emotional crash after the panic of the trigger has played out. This is quite a tough place to be, especially if you're starting to build awareness around your patterns. Okay, because sometimes it's almost like these things play out automatically, right? And we say, next time I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to react that way. But then we do, okay, because it's automatic. The reason it's automatic is because this wound, these triggers, these compensating behaviors are stored so deep in your subconscious that they play out on autopilot. So as human beings, we spend, say, around 95% of our life unconscious, okay, which means living on autopilot. That autopilot behavior is fueled by the subconscious mind. So if right now the contents of your subconscious mind are fear, trauma, insecurity, wounding, conditioning, unhelpful core beliefs like I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'll be abandoned, I'll be rejected, and then all of these coping mechanisms, if they're stored in your subconscious mind, that is what gets automatically activated when you are triggered. Okay, and it's just how the brain develops. So without going too much into it, let's say this is a terrible version of the brain. Wow. So the further down, okay, the more primitive the brain. So the bottom of the brain is responsible for the automatic responses in the body. The nervous system, the part of your brain that is responsible for things like digestion, breathing, heartbeat, pumping blood around your body, all of those basic things, okay. The more you move up the brain, so it's usually split into different levels like this, the more you move up the brain, the more complex it becomes. So up here, the top half of the brain, that is responsible for things like creative thought, okay, cognitive thinking, the ability to have a conversation, the ability to be creative, okay, the rational mind, the logical mind, all of that is stored up here. But your automatic responses are stored down here. So that's why sometimes you can get triggered and you react before you've even known, or before you've even realized what's going on. It's because all of these reactions are stored in the primitive part of the brain. That is why often you can have these triggers, compensating behavior, you're in survival mode, and then you have this emotional crash. It's like that, okay, that realization, I've done it again. And then we have stage 6, which is reinforced identity. So the reinforced identity speaks into who you think you are at your core. So I touched on it a little bit earlier about the core beliefs of I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'll be abandoned, I'll be rejected. That is your identity, okay? That is what you believe about yourself on a core level. So when you've gone through this system, when you've been triggered and you go into survival mode and you engage in the compensating behavior and you have the realization, what that does is it reinforces your identity. Okay, it reinforces what you believe about yourself. I always do this, I am not enough, I'm not worthy, etc. And that just reinforces the identity. Then a little bit of time passes, okay, and before you know it, you'll be back to stage 1, which is false stability. You know, maybe in this area, okay, you got the reassurance or the validation that you were looking for, or maybe you got the emotional distance that you needed to decompress and calm down, okay? And then it takes you back to false stability, which is you in another situation where you're just waiting to be triggered. Okay, so maybe you're in that relationship now and everything's feeling good, but at some point that trigger is going to come. That's going to trigger the anxious spiral, or it's going to trigger the avoidance shutdown. Okay, because the wound is under there. And until you deal with it at the root, that is just going to keep going. That is the cycle that you're going to be stuck in your entire life, and it just keeps playing out and playing out. It doesn't matter who you're with. It kind of does. What I mean by that is, if you don't deal with this stuff at the root, you will carry it into each relationship. But the partner you are with can sometimes impact the expression, okay, of your attachment style. So for me, I struggled a lot of years with being a disorganized attachment, which means I have the jackpot of being anxious and avoidant. So depending on the situation, I used to be anxious at the start. I would overgive, I would people please, I would lose myself. Then I would get feelings for somebody. And then when things got too close and I felt too much pressure, I felt suffocated, I felt like I needed space, that's when I would shut down and push the other person away. That is the disorganized attachment. So it's the blend of anxious and avoidant. So depending on your attachment style, the person that you're with can trigger different parts of your attachment. So if you are disorganized, which a lot more people are disorganized than they realize, a lot of people think they lean anxious or lean avoidant, but what you'll find is it depends on the person that you're with more often than not. But this is going to stay, okay, until you deal with it. The place I always recommend to start is inner child healing, okay, because that gets to the root of where this stuff comes from. Your attachment style was being developed from the moment you were born. And what you'll find is you'll start to reflect on what happened in childhood, and you start to get curious, and you start to look at the impacts that the different relationships that you had on you and your development as a man, which can obviously be an uncomfortable process, but it is absolutely necessary. When you get to the root of it and you do the inner child work and you learn to become the man that you needed when you were younger, okay, that's when change starts to happen. That's when you'll start to move into being secure. Something else that you want to do alongside of that is what we call somatic work. So somatic work is working within the body. Okay, it's healing the nervous system. It's healing the body, because the body holds on to trauma very differently than the brain does. This stuff goes way beyond the logical mind. Okay, it's energetic, it's a heart, it's in the body, it's a soul level wound. Okay, and it requires us to work with it at each layer to be able to do that. Another tool that's really good, and I'll be covering all of these in different videos, but subconscious reprogramming. As I spoke into earlier, your core beliefs and who you believe you are, okay, are stored in the subconscious mind. There are specific neuroscience-backed practices that we can use to actually change that and rewire that. So you can rewire the brain to change from the old beliefs that are unhelpful into the new beliefs. Now, if you believed on a core level that you were enough and you were worthy and you were lovable and you were not going to be abandoned or rejected, how different do you think your life would look? Life gets very different when you do this work, gents. This is the loop that needs to be broken in order for you to come home to yourself, in order to become secure. Now, underneath this video, there's going to be a link, and that link will take you to a page, and that page contains a button. And when you click that button, you will be given everything that you need on your healing journey. Okay, because that is my mission this year, to make healing as accessible as possible to every single man that needs it. You'll have everything that you need if you follow that process. But apart from that, I hope this has given you some sort of awareness. As always, awareness is the first step to change. Wherever you are on your journey, whether you are just starting out your healing work or you are way down the line, okay, it doesn't matter. This sort of stuff, when you start to look at your behavior and your relationships through frameworks, okay, it helps you make sense of it. And through that awareness, we can create change. Cheers, gents.